The monitors beeped steadily in the sterile hospital room, their rhythm the only sound cutting through the heavy silence. Two small bodies lay motionless on adjacent beds, pale faces barely visible above white sheets. Wires snaked from tiny arms to machines that blinked with clinical indifference. James Westfield collapsed into the chair between them, his expensive suit rumpled and soaked through with melted snow. His hands trembled as they covered his face. At 39, he'd built an empire. He'd conquered markets, dominated boardrooms, amassed wealth beyond measure. None of it mattered now. If you'd waited even 12 more hours— The doctor's words still echoed, sharp as broken glass. Across from him, a young woman in a damp sweater held one child's hand in each of hers. Eleanor Parker, 26 years old, looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "You saved them," James whispered, his voice cracking. "You saved my daughters when I couldn't." The question hung unspoken between them. How had it come to this? Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Bar Harbor, Maine wore winter like a widow's veil. December 2024 had arrived with bitter winds that clawed at the Victorian mansions perched along the cliffs, their grandeur no shield against the Atlantic's fury. Snow fell in relentless sheets, burying the town beneath layers of white that glittered like broken promises. The Westfield estate rose from the frozen landscape like something from another era. All dark timber and stone, with windows that reflected nothing but gray sky and darker water. Inside, silence reigned with an authority money couldn't buy. The kind of silence that came after screaming stopped, after hope died. James Westfield stood at his office window, phone pressed to his ear, watching snowflakes spiral into the void. At 39, he looked older. Silver threaded through dark hair he forgot to cut. His reflection showed a stranger in an expensive suit, hollow-eyed and thin. The CEO of Westfield Tech Solutions, a man who'd turned algorithms into empires. A father who couldn't make his daughters smile. 18 months. That's how long Catherine had been gone. Cancer had taken her at 35, too young, too fast. The twins had been barely 3 years old. They were 4 now, and they hadn't spoken since the funeral. Not one word, not one laugh, not one tear. The pediatrician called it selective mutism, trauma-induced. The child psychologist from Boston had fancier terms. The 3 nannies who'd quit in 6 months had simpler words. Impossible. Broken. Lost. Abigail had her mother's green eyes and her father's red hair. Charlotte was all Catherine, golden and blue-eyed like sunlight on water. Both sat in their pristine playroom each day, surrounded by toys that cost more than most families earned in a year, and stared at nothing. Eating when forced, sleeping when exhausted, existing without living. The current nanny, Constance Whitmore, ran the household with military precision. 68 years old, 4 decades of experience, impeccable credentials, she believed in structure, discipline, tough love, she called it. The children needed boundaries, she insisted. Coddling would only make them weaker. James wanted to believe her, needed to believe someone knew what they were doing because God knew he didn't. His phone buzzed. Another applicant for the assistant nanny position. The ad had run in the Ellsworth Herald, the working-class town 15 miles inland, where people still answered classified ads in newspapers because they couldn't afford not to. Eleanor Parker, 26 years old, high school education, references from hotels and diners. No credentials, no training, nothing that should make him consider her. He scheduled the interview anyway. Desperation had a way of lowering standards. Eleanor Parker's hands shook as she folded the third dress into her canvas bag. The trailer's thin walls did nothing to keep out the December cold, and her breath made small clouds in the dim morning light. Outside, Ellsworth was waking up, the working part of Maine that tourists never photographed, where people lived paycheck to paycheck and winter meant choosing between heat and food. "You sure about this, baby?" Ruth Parker stood in the doorway wiping flour from her hands. At 62, she looked older. Night shifts at the diner had carved lines deep into her face, but her eyes were still sharp, still kind. "We need the money, Mama." Ellie didn't look up. If she looked at her mother, she might cry, and she couldn't afford tears today. "Sam's therapy bills are piling up. Your heart medication—" "We'll manage. We always do. Managing isn't living." Ellie zipped the bag closed with more force than necessary. "This job pays 3 times what I make cleaning hotel rooms. Live-in position, room and board included. I can send most of it home." Ruth crossed the small space and pressed something into Ellie's palm, a worn Bible, pocket-sized, held together with tape. "For courage," she said softly. Then, quieter, "Love melts stone faster than fire, child. Remember that." Ellie didn't understand, but she nodded anyway. From the narrow hallway, her brother Samuel watched in silence. At 18, he should have been preparing for college. Instead, he spent most days in his room, fighting panic attacks that came without warning. The anxiety disorder had started after their sister died. 12 years ago. Lily. Ellie never said her name out loud anymore. "Take care of Mama," Ellie told Sam. He nodded once, a quick jerk of his chin, and disappeared back into his room before emotion could crack through. The bus ride to Bar Harbor took 40 minutes and crossed into another world. Ellsworth fell away, its sagging houses and boarded storefronts replaced by pristine streets and restored colonials. By the time the bus reached the coastal road, Ellie was pressing her face to the cold window, watching mansions slide past like something from a movie she couldn't afford to see. The Westfield estate sat at the end of a private drive lined with snow-laden pines. Gates of wrought iron opened with a low hum. Ellie clutched her bag tighter as a guard waved the taxi through, his eyes dismissive as they took in her thrift store coat and scuffed boots. The mansion loomed, Victorian architecture in dark stone and timber, windows reflecting nothing but winter sky. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It looked like the kind of place where people like her entered through the back door. A woman in a crisp gray dress met her at the entrance. "Miss Parker, I'm Mrs. Chen, house manager. Your prompt, Mr." Westfield appreciates punctuality. Her accent was clipped, professional. Her eyes assessed Ellie in 3 seconds and found her wanting. The foyer stretched upward into shadows, marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost more than the trailer Ellie had just left, fresh flowers in a vase on a table that gleamed like dark water. Everything perfect, everything cold. "This way." Mrs. Chen's heels clicked a rhythm Ellie tried to match. They passed room after room, a dining room with a table for 12, a library with floor-to-ceiling books, a sitting room that looked like it had never been sat in. Photographs lined the walls. A wedding, a beautiful woman with golden hair laughing into the camera, the same woman holding 2 infants, her face radiant with joy. Then nothing. Blank wall space where more pictures should have been. "Mr. Westfield is in the library. He's conducting interviews back-to-back today. Keep your answers concise." "He's a busy man." The library smelled of leather and old paper and something else. Grief, maybe, though Ellie didn't know if grief had a smell. James Westfield stood by the window, silhouetted against the weak winter light. He didn't turn when they entered. "Mr. Westfield, Miss Parker is here." He turned slowly. The man in the photographs had been younger, fuller in the face, with something alive behind his eyes. This version looked carved from ice. Expensive suit hanging on a frame that had lost weight it couldn't afford to lose. Dark hair going silver at the temples. Eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "Miss Parker?" His voice matched his appearance. Cold, distant, exhausted. "You have experience with children?" "Yes, sir." Ellie's voice came out smaller than she'd intended. She cleared her throat, tried again. "I've cared for children. Younger siblings, neighbors' kids. I worked at a daycare briefly before—" She stopped, before it closed. Before she couldn't bear being around children who reminded her of Lily. "No formal training." "No, sir." "Then why should I hire you?" The question hung in the air between them. Ellie felt the weight of it, the challenge. She could give him the safe answer, something about dedication, hard work, reliability, something forgettable that would end with her on the next bus back to Ellsworth. Instead, she met his eyes. "Because maybe credentials aren't what your daughters need." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or irritation. "And what would you know about what they need?" "Nothing," Ellie admitted. "But I know what it looks like when someone's grieving, when they've lost something so big there aren't words for it. And I know that sometimes the worst thing you can do is pretend everything's fine when it's not." James Westfield's jaw tightened. For a moment, Ellie thought she'd gone too far. Then he gestured to a leather chair. "Sit." She sat. He remained standing, arms crossed, looking down at her like a judge considering sentence. 3 nannies in 6 months, he said. "All with impeccable credentials, all failed. My current nanny, Miss Whitmore, has 40 years of experience. She's the best in her field, but she needs assistance because my daughters are—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Difficult." "They're 4 years old," Ellie said quietly, "and they lost their mother. That's not difficult. That's devastating. Miss Whitmore believes in structure, discipline. She says what they need is consistency, not coddling." "And is it working?" The question landed like a stone in still water. James turned back to the window. His reflection looked older than the man himself. "They don't speak. They barely eat. They don't play. They exist, Miss Parker, but they don't live. So no, nothing is working." Before Ellie could respond, the library door opened. A woman entered, tall, gray-haired, spine straight as a rod. She wore a crisp uniform in charcoal gray, her face arranged in lines of permanent disapproval. This had to be Constance Whitmore. "Mr. Westfield, I wasn't aware you were conducting interviews personally." Her voice carried the kind of authority that assumed obedience. "Miss Whitmore, this is Eleanor Parker. She's applying for the assistant position." Constance's eyes swept over Ellie with surgical precision. Everything about Ellie was assessed and found wanting in that single glance. The second-hand coat, the nervous hands, the absence of polish. "I see. And her qualifications?" "We were just discussing that," James said. "I'm sure we can find someone more suitable, someone with proper training. The Whitmore method requires precision. These children need structure, not sentiment." "The Whitmore method," Ellie repeated before she could stop herself. "What's that?" Constance's smile was thin. 40 years of proven techniques for managing difficult children. Strict schedules, sleep training, behavioral modification, no coddling. "Children thrive on boundaries, Miss Parker, not on emotional indulgence." Something cold settled in Ellie's stomach. "Sleep training? They're 4 years old, and they just lost their mother." Precisely why they need structure more than ever. Grief is no excuse for poor behavior. I've implemented a comprehensive program, meals at fixed times, mandatory quiet periods, consequences for tantrums. The crying it out method has been particularly effective. Effective at what? The words came out sharper than Ellie intended. Making them stop crying or making them stop feeling? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Constance drew herself up. Mr. Westfield, I must object to this tone of questioning. This young woman clearly lacks the professional detachment necessary for— I'd like to meet them, Ellie interrupted, looking at James. Your daughters, before you decide. Constance made a sound of protest, but James raised a hand. He studied Ellie for a long moment, those exhausted eyes searching for something. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he nodded. Second floor. The nursery. The staircase curved upward into shadows. Constance led the way, her displeasure radiating like cold from stone. Mrs. Chen followed silently. James brought up the rear, each step seeming to cost him something. The nursery door stood open. Beyond it, Ellie could see soft gray walls, white furniture arranged with geometric precision. Everything clean, everything perfect, everything dead. Two small girls sat on an expensive rug in the center of the room. They weren't playing, they weren't moving, they simply sat, facing the window that overlooked the frozen ocean. Abigail wore red, a velvet dress probably meant for special occasions, her copper hair pulled back in ribbons. Charlotte was in blue, golden hair braided with precision. Both had their backs to the door. Neither turned when they entered. Girls, Constance said, her voice clipped, we have a visitor. Turn around and greet her properly. Nothing, not a twitch, not an acknowledgement. Abigail, Charlotte, I said turn around. Still nothing. Ellie felt something break inside her chest. She'd seen this before, this stillness, this retreat from the world. She'd seen it in the mirror for months after Lily died, the shutting down, the silence that was safer than words. She crossed the room slowly, aware of Constance's disapproving stare, of James's hollow gaze. She knelt on the rug beside the girls, careful not to touch, not to intrude. Hello, she said softly. My name's Ellie. You don't have to talk to me. That's okay, but I'm just going to sit here for a minute if that's all right with you. Abigail's eyes shifted slightly. Not toward Ellie, but checking, assessing, testing. Charlotte clutched something in her small hands. A blanket, Ellie realized. Soft blue fabric, worn at the edges. She held it the way drowning people hold driftwood. That's a beautiful blanket, Ellie murmured. Blue's my favorite color, too. Miss Parker, I must insist, Constance began. Miss Whitmore, James's voice cut through. Let her try. Silence stretched. Ellie sat, not moving, barely breathing. The girls continued to stare out the window at the gray ocean and grayer sky, but something had shifted, some microscopic change in the air. Abigail's fingers moved, picking at the rug's edge. Charlotte's grip on the blanket loosened slightly. They were listening. You know what I think? Ellie said, still soft, still gentle. I think the ocean's lonely today. All that water and no one to talk to. Kind of like being in a room full of people and still feeling alone. Charlotte's head turned, just a fraction, just enough. Their eyes met. Ellie's brown, Charlotte's blue. In those eyes, Ellie saw everything she'd felt at 14 when the world stopped making sense. When adults used words like closure and moving on, as if grief were a switch you could flip off. I get lonely sometimes, too, Ellie whispered. It's scary, isn't it? When the person who's supposed to be there isn't anymore. Charlotte's lips parted. No sound came out, but Ellie saw it. The almost word, the reaching. Behind them, Constance made a noise of impatience, but James stood frozen, watching his daughter's face change for the first time in 18 months. Mr. Westfield, Constance said tightly, surely you can see this is highly inappropriate. The child needs discipline, not therapeutic coddling. You're hired, James said, still watching Charlotte. Miss Parker, the position is yours. You start immediately. Constance Whitmore's face went rigid. Mr. Westfield, I must protest. This is highly irregular. You cannot simply hire someone without proper vetting, without references, without— I just did. James's voice carried a finality that stopped her mid-sentence. Miss Parker will assist you with the children. You'll train her in your methods, and we'll evaluate progress in 2 weeks. This is a mistake. Then it's mine to make. Constance's lips pressed into a bloodless line. She turned on her heel and left, her footsteps sharp and angry on the hardwood floor. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. I'll show Miss Parker to her room and provide orientation materials. She gestured for Ellie to follow. Ellie stood slowly, careful not to startle the twins. Charlotte was still looking at her, those blue eyes enormous in her small face. Abigail had turned slightly, watching from the corner of her eye, curious but cautious, like a wild animal testing whether to flee. I'll be right down the hall, Ellie said softly to them. If you need anything, okay? No response. But Charlotte's fingers tightened on the blue blanket, and that felt like something. The room they gave her was on the 2nd floor, 3 doors down from the nursery. Small but pristine. A single bed with white linens, a dresser, a window overlooking the gardens buried in snow. It was twice the size of her room at the trailer and felt 10 times more foreign. Meals are served at set times, Mrs. Chen explained, her tone businesslike. 6 a.m. breakfast for staff, noon lunch, 6 p.m. dinner. The children eat at 7, noon, and 5. Miss Whitmore maintains a strict schedule. Deviations are not encouraged. Ellie unpacked her meager belongings while Mrs. Chen rattled off rules and expectations. 3 dresses, an extra pair of shoes, the Bible her mother had given her. It all fit in 1 drawer. Questions? Mrs. Chen asked. What happened to their mother? The words came out before Ellie could stop them. I'm sorry, I shouldn't. Cancer. Ovarian. 6 months from diagnosis to death. Mrs. Chen's voice softened slightly. Mrs. Westfield was only 35. The girls were barely 3. They attended the funeral. Perhaps they shouldn't have, but Mr. Westfield thought— She trailed off. After that, they stopped speaking, stopped eating properly, stopped being children. And Mr. Westfield? Works 18-hour days, sleeps 4 hours if we're lucky. He loved his wife very much. Grief affects people differently. After Mrs. Chen left, Ellie sat on the edge of the bed and called her mother. Ruth answered on the first ring. Baby, how'd it go? I got the job. Ellie's voice cracked. Mama, these little girls, they're so broken, and the nanny they have, she's all rules and coldness. She wants to make them tough, but they don't need tough. They need you, Ruth said firmly. That's why God put you there. You remember what I told you? Love melts stone faster than fire. That's right. Those babies lost their mama. But maybe the Lord's giving them another angel. You be that angel, Ellie. After hanging up, Ellie pulled out her mother's Bible. She didn't open it, just held it, feeling the weight of something larger than herself pressing down. Lily's face floated through her mind, blonde pigtails, missing front tooth, the way she'd laughed at everything. I couldn't save you, Ellie whispered to the empty room, but maybe I can save them. The first night was hell. Constance's evening routine was military in precision. Bath at 6:15, twins placed in separate tubs, exactly 5 minutes each, no playing. Pajamas at 6:30, matching sets laid out in advance. Dinner at 6:45, pureed vegetables and protein, measured portions. Any food thrown or refused resulted in immediate removal from the high chair and placement in the crib as consequence for poor behavior. Both girls refused to eat. They're testing boundaries, Constance said coldly as Abigail turned her head away from the spoon. We do not negotiate with children. Maybe they're just not hungry, Ellie offered. Children eat on schedule. Allowing them to dictate meals creates disorder. Constance set the bowl aside. Very well. No dinner means bedtime. 7 o'clock. Constance placed both girls in their cribs, expensive white cribs with pristine sheets and carefully selected educational mobiles hanging overhead. The nursery was temperature-controlled, decorated in soothing grays and whites, equipped with monitors and night lights and everything money could buy, everything except warmth. Sleep training is essential, Constance explained to Ellie. We place them in their cribs awake. They learn to self-soothe. Crying is expected and must be ignored. If you respond to crying, you teach them that tantrums work. They're 4 years old, Ellie said carefully. Not infants. Don't they usually Miss Parker, are you questioning my methods on your first day? Ellie bit her tongue. No, ma'am. Good. We close the door and allow them to settle. They may cry for 20 to 30 minutes initially. By the end of the week, they'll be sleeping through the night without intervention. Constance pulled the door closed. Through the baby monitor on the hallway table, Ellie could hear shuffling, small sounds of movement, then silence. See, Constance said. They're learning already. But Ellie knew that silence. It wasn't peace. It was surrender. At 11:47, the crying began. Ellie had been lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep in this strange house with its thick walls and expensive quiet. When the first wail cut through the monitor, she jolted upright. It wasn't normal crying. It was the sound of something breaking, raw and desperate and terrified. She rushed into the hallway. Constance was already there, standing outside the nursery door like a sentinel. Miss Parker, return to your room. They're crying. They're testing. This is standard sleep training. We do not intervene. That's not testing, that's... Another scream cut through, this one from both girls at once, harmonizing in anguish. Return to your room, Constance repeated, her voice ice. That is a direct order. Ellie stood frozen. Every instinct screamed to go to them. But this was her first night. If she disobeyed now, she'd be fired. And then what? Another nanny would come. Someone who might be worse. She turned toward her room. The crying followed her, through walls, through doors, through the pillow she pressed over her ears. It wasn't just the twins crying now. In her mind, she heard Lily. Heard her own younger self screaming for help that came too late. At 1:15 a.m. she couldn't take it anymore. She walked past Constance's room. The older woman's light was off, either asleep or pretending to be. She pushed open the nursery door. The scene broke her heart. Both girls stood in their cribs, small hands clutching the rails, faces red and wet and twisted with grief. Abigail was screaming herself hoarse. Charlotte had vomited down the front of her pajamas and was sobbing in great hiccuping gasps, barely able to breathe. Oh, sweetheart. Ellie rushed to Charlotte's crib first, lifting the small body out. The girl was burning up, whether from fever or crying, Ellie couldn't tell. She grabbed wipes, cleaned Charlotte's face and chest as gently as she could while the child continued to wail. You're making a grave mistake. Constance stood in the doorway, backlit by the hall light like some avenging angel of discipline. They need comfort, Ellie said, lifting Abigail out with her other arm. Both girls immediately clutched at her, desperate and small. They need to learn self-reliance. You're creating dependency that will cripple them. They're 4 years old. Their mother is dead. They don't need self-reliance. They need to know someone gives a damn. Lower your voice. You'll wake Mr. Westfield. Good. Maybe he should see this. But Constance had already turned away, disappearing down the hall with that rigid spine and closed heart. Ellie sank to the floor, one twin on each side of her. They were still crying, but quieter now, the kind of crying that came from exhaustion rather than panic. She began to hum, no particular song, just sound. just something that wasn't silence or screaming. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word," she finally started, her voice rough. "Mama's gonna buy you a mockingbird." The song her own mother had sung, the song she'd sung to Lily. Charlotte's sobs slowed to hiccups. Abigail's screams became whimpers. Ellie kept singing, kept humming, rocking slightly. Her back ached. Her arms went numb. She didn't care. At 2:30, Abigail's head dropped onto her shoulder, dead weight, asleep. At 3:15, Charlotte's hand reached out and grabbed Ellie's finger. Held on. Didn't let go even as her eyes closed. Ellie sat frozen, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Two small bodies pressed against her. Two small hearts beating against her chest. She stayed there as the night deepened, as the stars wheeled overhead, as the house settled into the kind of silence that felt earned rather than enforced. She was still there at 6:15 when James Westfield came to check on the noise. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Ellie asleep, sitting up, back against the crib, neck bent at an uncomfortable angle. Both daughters curled against her like puppies, seeking warmth. All three breathing in sync. Something moved in his chest. Something he'd thought died with Catherine. He stood there for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of their breathing, the way Charlotte's hand still gripped Ellie's finger even in sleep. He left without waking them, went to his office, stared at the family photo on his desk. Catherine laughing, holding the twins as infants back when the world still made sense. "Maybe," he whispered to the photograph, "maybe there's still hope." By 7 a.m., the house was awake. Constance demanded an immediate meeting with James. Mrs. Chen hovered nearby, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "Miss Parker violated every protocol," Constance said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "She undermined months of sleep training. She responded to manipulative crying. She has fundamentally compromised the structure these children desperately need." James looked at Ellie, who stood with dark circles under her eyes, still wearing yesterday's clothes, looking like she'd been through a war. "Is this true?" "I sat with them when they were crying," Ellie said. "That's all. They were scared and alone, and I sat with them. You created dependency. They're 4 years old." Ellie's exhaustion made her reckless. "They lost their mother 18 months ago. They're not being manipulative. They're grieving. And maybe if someone had just held them, just told them it was okay to be sad, they wouldn't have shut down completely. This is exactly the kind of emotional sentimentality that..." The girls slept. James's quiet words cut through the argument. Both women turned to him. "Last night, for the first time in weeks, they slept through the rest of the night. I checked at 4 a.m. They were peaceful." Constance's jaw worked. "A temporary result of exhaustion from crying. In the long term, Miss Whitmore, we'll see. You have your methods. Miss Parker has hers. I'm willing to observe both. We'll evaluate in 2 weeks." "Mr. Westfield, I must insist, 2 weeks. That's my decision." After Constance left, fury radiating from every stiff movement, James gestured for Ellie to stay. "Thank you," he said simply, "for last night. I didn't do anything special, I just stayed. Sometimes that's everything." He turned to the window, hands in his pockets. "My wife, Catherine, she would have done exactly what you did. She would have said exactly what you said." His voice cracked slightly. "I miss that. I miss someone caring more about feelings than schedules." "Mr. Westfield." "James, please. Mr. Westfield is what they call me in boardrooms." "James," Ellie corrected. "Your daughters are beautiful, and they're strong. Stronger than anyone gives them credit for." Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the only power you have left." He looked at her then, really looked, saw something in her eyes that recognized his daughter's pain because she'd lived it herself. "What happened to you, Ellie Parker? What made you understand grief so well?" She could have deflected, should have. Instead, exhaustion made her honest. "I lost my little sister when I was 14. Lily. She drowned while I was supposed to be watching her. I've spent 12 years trying to forgive myself, trying to save other children to make up for the one I couldn't save." James was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You can't save everyone." "I know. But maybe I can save someone. Maybe that's enough. Maybe it is." He left her standing there, sunlight streaming through the windows, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She made her way back to the nursery where both girls were awake in their cribs, watching the door. Waiting. Ellie smiled at them. "Good morning, sweethearts. How about we try breakfast somewhere other than those high chairs? Maybe we could eat on a blanket, like a picnic. Would you like that?" No response. But Charlotte's fingers loosened slightly on her blue blanket, and Abigail's eyes followed Ellie with something that might have been curiosity. It wasn't much, but it was something. And sometimes, Ellie thought, something was enough to start with. The war between methods began in earnest the next morning. Constance insisted on maintaining her schedule. 7 a.m. sharp, the twins were bathed, dressed in matching outfits she'd selected, and placed in their high chairs for breakfast. Measured portions of oatmeal, no substitutions, no variations. Both girls turned their faces away. "They will eat when they're hungry enough," Constance said, her voice flat. "Remove them." "Maybe they don't like oatmeal," Ellie suggested carefully. She'd slept 3 hours and felt like she was walking through fog, but the need to advocate for these children burned through the exhaustion. Children don't get to choose their meals. That leads to disorder. Or maybe it leads to them actually eating something. The look Constance gave her could have frozen the ocean. "Miss Parker, you've been here 2 days. I've been doing this for 40 years. I suggest you observe and learn rather than critique." But James was in the doorway, coffee in hand, watching. "Let her try," he said quietly. Constance's spine went rigid. "Mr. Westfield." 2 weeks, Miss Whitmore." We agreed. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Ellie knelt beside the high chairs. "Abby Lottie, what if we went to the kitchen? Would you like to see where the food comes from?" No response. But Charlotte's eyes shifted toward her. Abigail's small hand released its death grip on the high chair tray. The kitchen was enormous, all stainless steel and marble counters, windows overlooking snow-covered gardens. A man in his 50s stood at the stove, his dark skin contrasting with the white chef's coat. He looked up as Ellie entered with both girls in her arms. "Well now, haven't seen these little ones down here in months." His voice was warm, accented with something southern. "I'm Marcus. You must be the new help." "Ellie." "Sorry to interrupt, but I was hoping, could they maybe help make breakfast? Something simple?" Marcus's face lit up. "Oh, I like you already. Come here, baby girls. Let's make some scrambled eggs. You ever crack an egg before?" He set them on stools by the counter, gave each a bowl, showed Abigail how to tap the egg on the edge. It broke messily, shell and all falling in. But Abigail's eyes widened. She looked at the mess, then at Marcus. "That's perfect," he said. "Now we fish out the shells. See? Making food is messy business." Charlotte was more cautious, but when Marcus guided her small hands, she cracked her egg with precision. A tiny smile, barely there, gone in a heartbeat, flickered across her face. They scrambled the eggs together, burned them slightly, added too much milk. The result was imperfect and beautiful. Both girls ate. Not much, not everything. But Charlotte took 3 bites without being forced. Abigail managed half the plate. When she was done, she looked up at Ellie with something new in her eyes. Trust, fragile and testing, but there. From the kitchen doorway, Constance watched with barely concealed fury. James stood beside her, and for the first time in 18 months, something in his chest loosened enough to let him breathe. The next few weeks became a careful dance between two opposing forces. Constance maintained her rigid schedule, bath times, meal times, structured play with educational toys. She documented everything: food intake, sleep patterns, behavioral incidents. Her reports to James were meticulous, professional, damning. Miss Parker encourages chaos, she wrote, allows the children to dictate activities, provides comfort when discipline is required. This approach may seem kind, but it's ultimately cruel. She's teaching them the world will bend to their emotions. But Ellie had her own evidence. Charlotte began eating regularly. Not on Constance's schedule, but when food was presented as play, as exploration. She still clutched her blue blanket, but less desperately. Sometimes she'd set it down for minutes at a time. Abigail started testing boundaries, not with tantrums, but with curiosity. She'd touch things she wasn't supposed to, watching Ellie's face to see what would happen. When Ellie redirected gently, rather than punishing, Abigail would try again, differently. Learning, engaging, small victories, but victories nonetheless. The household staff took sides. Marcus and the younger housekeepers gravitated toward Ellie's warmth. The older staff, raised on stricter methods, supported Constance. Mrs. Chen remained diplomatically neutral, though Ellie sometimes caught her smiling when the twins laughed, because they were laughing now. Not often, not loudly, but small giggles would escape when Marcus made silly faces, or when Ellie pretended to trip over her own feet. James watched it all from a distance. He'd emerge from his office for meals, sit at the far end of the table, observe his daughters with an expression Ellie couldn't read. Sometimes she'd catch him staring at Charlotte with such naked longing it hurt to witness. But he never reached for them, never joined the play. "Why doesn't he touch them?" Ellie asked Marcus one afternoon while the girls napped. Marcus sighed, chopping vegetables with practiced precision. "Guilt, I think. He blames himself for their mama dying, for not seeing how sick she was until too late. Thinks he doesn't deserve their love. That's not how children work. No. But that's how grief works." 3 weeks in, Ellie found Catherine's journal. She was cleaning James's bedroom, a task Constance had assigned with obvious disdain for Ellie's new position, when she knocked a book off the nightstand. It fell open, loose pages scattering. She knelt to gather them, and the handwriting caught her eye. Feminine. And elegant, desperate. October 15th. I can't stop crying. The girls are beautiful and perfect, and I feel nothing. What kind of mother feels nothing? James keeps saying I'm doing great, that I look great, that everything's great, but I'm drowning and he can't see me waving. Ellie's hands shook as she read more. December 3rd. Saw Dr. Chen today. She says it's postpartum depression, wants me to try medication. But if I tell James, he'll worry. He's already working so hard for us. I can't be one more problem. March 8th. It's been a year and it's getting worse, not better. I love my daughters. I know I do. But sometimes I look at them and feel like I'm watching from underwater. Everything's muffled. Everything's gray. The final entry was dated 2 weeks before Catherine died. May 20th. I'm so tired. James doesn't see me anymore. He sees the perfect wife he wants me to be. I've tried to tell him. But he's always on a call, always in a meeting, always just about to get on a plane. I'm alone in a house full of people, and I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending I'm okay. Ellie sat back on her heels, tears streaming down her face. The perfect marriage everyone spoke of. the beautiful wife who smiled in every photograph, all of it hiding this ocean of pain. She shouldn't have read it. She knew that. But now, she couldn't unknow it. That evening, after the girls were asleep, actually asleep peacefully in their own beds, Ellie found James in his office. He looked up from his laptop, surprise crossing his face. "Is something wrong? I need to talk to you." She closed the door behind her. "About Catherine." His face went blank. "I don't discuss my wife with staff." "I'm not staff. I'm someone who cares about your daughters. And I found her journal." The color drained from his face. "You had no right." "I know. I'm sorry." "But James—" She moved closer, holding the journal out. "She was suffering. She had postpartum depression. She was trying to tell you." "Don't." His voice cracked. "Don't do this. She needed help and she was trying to ask." "I said don't." He stood abruptly, sending his chair rolling back. "You think I don't know? You think I haven't read every page 1,000 times? You think I don't spend every night knowing I failed her?" His hands were shaking. "I was so busy building this empire, making money, securing our future, and she was dying inside our marriage, and I didn't see it because I didn't want to see it. James, get out, please, just get out." Ellie left the journal on his desk and fled. She made it to her room before the sobs came. She'd pushed too hard, crossed a line. She'd be fired in the morning. But at 3 a.m. there was a soft knock on her door. James stood in the hallway, still dressed, eyes red-rimmed. "I'm sorry for yelling." "You were right to confront me. I shouldn't have read her journal. Maybe I needed someone to." He leaned against the doorframe, exhausted beyond measure. "I've been avoiding her memory, throwing myself into work like I did when she was alive, the same pattern, the same failure." "You're not failing your daughters." "Aren't I? They don't speak. They barely eat. They look at me like I'm a stranger." "Because you are," Ellie said gently. "You're so afraid of losing them that you've already let them go." He flinched. "I don't know how to reach them. The same way you reach anyone. You show up. You stay. You let yourself be imperfect." She paused. "Tomorrow, instead of working all day, sit with them. Just sit. Don't try to fix anything. Don't perform. Just be their dad." What if they don't want me? What if they do? The next morning, James did something he hadn't done in 18 months. He came to breakfast. Not to observe, not to check his phone while the girls ate. He sat beside Charlotte across from Abigail. Constance made a small sound of approval. "Mr. Westfield, I'm pleased to see you implementing proper family structure. Miss Whitmore, could you give us a moment? Just me and the girls. And Ellie." Constance's face went stony, but she left. Silence settled over the table. Charlotte stared at her scrambled eggs. Abigail picked at a piece of toast. James looked helpless. "Would you like to try?" Ellie asked softly, gesturing to Charlotte's plate. "She loves eggs now. Marcus lets her crack them herself." James's hand trembled as he picked up the child-sized fork, scooped a small amount of egg. "Charlotte, can I? Would you let Daddy help?" Charlotte's blue eyes, so like her mother's, lifted to his face. She studied him for a long moment, this man who looked like her father, but acted like a ghost. Then, slowly, she opened her mouth. James fed her one bite. Then another. His eyes filled with tears he didn't bother hiding. When Charlotte swallowed the third bite, she reached out and touched his hand, just one finger, just for a second. But it was enough to crack something in James that had been frozen since Catherine died. "Thank you, baby," he whispered. "Thank you for letting Daddy back in." From the doorway, Constance watched, and for the first time in 35 years, something in her own frozen heart began, just barely, to thaw. The storm came on a Wednesday. Weather services had been tracking it for days. A nor'easter building strength over the Atlantic, predicted to dump 3 feet of snow and bring winds that could snap power lines like kindling. Bar Harbor, prepared with the practiced efficiency of people who knew winter's teeth. Stores sold out of batteries and canned goods. Plows lined up at the municipal garage. The wealthy retreated to their mansions and waited. At the Westfield estate, Mrs. Chen coordinated preparations with military precision. Generator tested, firewood stacked, pantry stocked. The mansion could survive a siege, but tension crackled through the household that had nothing to do with weather. 4 weeks had passed since Ellie arrived. 4 weeks of watching 2 methods clash. Constance's rigid structure versus Ellie's gentle flexibility. And increasingly the girls were choosing. They reached for Ellie when they woke, called for her when they fell. That morning, when Constance tried to dress Charlotte in the outfit she'd selected, the little girl shook her head and pointed at Ellie. "Miss Parker doesn't choose your clothing," Constance said tightly. "I do." Charlotte's lip trembled. She clutched her blue blanket and turned away. "Charlotte Elizabeth, face me when I'm speaking to you." The little girl's shoulders hunched. Ellie saw it happening. The retreat. The shutdown. She stepped forward. "Maybe we could let her pick today. Just this once?" "Absolutely not. Allowing children to dictate their wardrobe leads to—" "Miss Whitmore." James stood in the doorway. He'd been doing that more often lately, appearing when least expected, watching his daughters with hungry eyes. "Let her choose." Constance's face went white. "Mr. Westfield, I must protest. We've discussed this. Consistency is—" "I know what we've discussed, and I'm telling you now, let my daughter choose her dress." Charlotte chose purple. It didn't match. The tights were green, the shoes red. She looked like a tiny rainbow and couldn't have been happier. Constance excused herself. Ellie heard her footsteps, sharp and angry, retreating to her room. By afternoon, the snow had started. Large flakes at first, beautiful and deceptive. By 4 o'clock, the wind picked up. By 6, the world beyond the windows had disappeared into white chaos. "Storm's supposed to peak around midnight," Mrs. Chen reported. "We're as ready as we can be." Dinner was tense. James sat with the girls. He did that every night now, fumbling his way through fatherhood with touching awkwardness. Charlotte let him cut her food. Abigail showed him her drawing, a chaotic scribble that might have been a house or a monster. "It's beautiful," he said, and meant it. Constance ate in silence, her disapproval radiating like cold. At 7:30, Ellie took the girls upstairs for bath and bed. They'd developed a routine, bubbles in the tub, songs while washing hair, stories after pajamas, nothing like Constance's 5-minute efficiency, but the girls were clean and happy. "Ellie?" Charlotte's small voice was barely audible over the running water. Ellie's heart stopped. It was the first time Charlotte had said her name. "Yes, sweetheart? Will you stay when the storm comes?" "I'm not going anywhere, I promise." In her own room down the hall, Constance stared at a photograph she kept hidden in her drawer. A little girl with blonde hair and a gap-toothed smile. Emily. 35 years gone, but the ache never dulled. She'd been young then. 23, single, desperate for work. The wealthy family in Boston had hired her to nanny their children while she left Emily with a neighbor during the day. She couldn't afford better childcare, couldn't afford to say no to the job. The day Emily died, Constance had been supervising the Boston children's swimming lesson. Emily had been home, drawing herself a bath like she'd seen Constance do 100 times, but Emily was only 5, didn't understand water depth, couldn't judge danger. The neighbor found her an hour later. Constance had lived 35 years with that image burned into her mind. her daughter, underwater, blue-lipped and beyond saving. The police had called it accidental. The family had called it unacceptable and fired her. And Constance had called it what it was, her fault. After that, she'd sworn no child under her care would ever be vulnerable again. She'd make them strong, independent, able to survive without constant attention because attention couldn't always be there. But watching Charlotte choose purple today, watching Abigail laugh at breakfast, watching them bloom under Ellie's warmth, something was breaking inside her. Some wall she'd built brick by brick over decades. At 11:47, the twins started crying. Both at once, like some nightmare symphony. Ellie bolted from her bed, nearly colliding with James in the hallway. They reached the nursery together. Charlotte was sitting up, sobbing, "Mommy! Want Mommy!" Abigail was standing in her crib, red-faced and screaming, "Mommy's gone! She's gone! Oh, babies!" Ellie rushed to Charlotte, lifted her out. James froze by Abigail's crib, hands hovering uselessly. I don't know what to do," he said, voice breaking. "Pick her up. Just pick her up." He lifted Abigail like she was made of glass. She fought him at first, pushing against his chest, but he held on, whispering, I'm here, Daddy's here," and eventually her small body collapsed against him. They sat on the floor together, James with Abigail, Ellie with Charlotte. The storm raged outside, wind shrieking like something alive. Inside, two little girls cried for a mother who'd never come back. "She's not coming back," Charlotte sobbed against Ellie's shoulder. "Mommy's not coming back." "No, sweetheart, she's not, and that's so unfair. That's so unfair." "Why did she leave?" James made a sound like something dying. "She didn't want to leave, baby girl. She got sick, really sick. And the sickness took her away. But she loved you. She loved you so much." "Then why didn't she stay?" Abigail's voice was small and broken and 4 years old. "Because sometimes love isn't enough to fight sickness. Sometimes bad things happen to people who don't deserve them, and all we can do is hold each other and remember and keep going." They stayed like that for an hour. Two broken adults holding two broken children while the storm tried to tear the world apart outside. When the girls finally slept, Ellie and James carried them to their beds. In the hallway they stood in the darkness, exhausted and wrung out. "Thank you," James whispered, "for knowing what to say. I never know what to say. You said exactly what they needed to hear. That it's not fair, that it hurts, that their feelings matter. I'm terrified I'm going to mess them up. You will? So will I. Nobody's perfect at this. Catherine was. No, she wasn't. She was human and hurting, and she did her best, just like you're doing now." Ellie touched his arm gently. "James, you're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be sad and angry and lost. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present." Before he could respond, a sound came from downstairs. Glass shattering. Then a thud. They ran. In the foyer, Constance lay on the marble floor, one hand pressed to her chest, her face gray. Shattered glass from a fallen picture frame scattered around her. "Call 911." James dropped to his knees beside her. "Constance, can you hear me?" Her eyes were open, but unfocused, her breathing shallow and rapid. Ellie grabbed the phone. 911, what's your emergency?" "We need an ambulance. Westfield Estate, Shore Road." "Woman, late 60s, possible heart attack. Ma'am, we have multiple emergencies from the storm. All units are deployed. Wait time is 4 to 6 hours. "She doesn't have 4 to 6 hours. James looked up at Ellie, and she saw the decision forming in his eyes even as she shook her head. "I'll drive her," he said. "James, you can't." The roads are... I'm not letting someone else die because I did nothing." He was already moving, grabbing his coat. "Get blankets. Keep the girls upstairs. If I'm not back by morning..." "You're coming back. Ellie, you're coming back because those girls need their father, and I'm not explaining to them why another parent left." Her voice shook. "So you drive carefully and you come back. Understand?" He stared at her, then nodded. They carried Constance to the Range Rover, wrapped her in blankets. James climbed into the driver's seat and looked back at the mansion where his daughters slept. "Tell them I love them," he said. "If something happens..." "Nothing's happening. Now go." The taillights disappeared into the white storm. The hours crawled. Ellie paced the foyer, phone clutched in her hand, jumping at every creak of the house settling, every howl of wind. Mrs. Chen had retreated to her quarters after helping clean up the broken glass. The rest of the staff slept or pretended to. Upstairs, the twins remained miraculously asleep. At 1:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. "James. We made it. Valley View Hospital. They're taking her back now." "How is she?" "Alive, conscious. They think it's her heart but won't know more until they run tests." His voice was rough with exhaustion. "The roads are hell, Ellie. I shouldn't have made it. Visibility was 0. I couldn't see the hood of my own car." "But you did make it. You're both alive." "Yeah." A long pause. Constance kept saying something in the car, kept saying, "I'm sorry, Emily. I'm so sorry." "Who's Emily?" "I don't know. I asked, but she just kept crying." Another pause. "I've never seen her cry before." "Didn't think she could. Everyone can cry, James. Some of us just forget how. I need to stay until she's stable. Could be hours. The girls are safe, are loved, are sleeping. Don't worry about us. Just get back when you can." After hanging up, Ellie went to check on the twins one more time. Both still asleep, Charlotte with her blue blanket, Abigail with her arms flung wide like she was trying to hug the world. So small, so precious, so heartbreakingly vulnerable. She thought about calling her mother, but it was too late. Instead, she pulled out Ruth's Bible, opened it to a random page. Psalm 147. "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." "I hope so," she whispered to the empty room. "God, I really hope so." James returned at dawn, snow-covered and hollow-eyed. Ellie met him at the door with coffee. "She's stable. Heart attack, but they caught it in time. She'll need surgery, but she's going to live." He accepted the coffee with shaking hands. "They're keeping her for observation. Roads are still bad. I couldn't have driven back except the plows were out." "Did she say anything else about Emily?" James sank into a chair by the cold fireplace. "When they were wheeling her to surgery, she grabbed my hand, said, 'Tell the girls I'm sorry. Tell them I was wrong.' Then she asked me something strange." "What?" "She asked if I'd ever lost someone and blamed myself for not being there. When I said yes, she started crying again. Said, 'Then you understand. Then you know why I couldn't let them be soft.'" Ellie sat across from him. "James, I think there's something in Constance's past. Something that made her the way she is. We all have something in our past, but not everyone lets it turn them cold." He looked at her with those exhausted, red-rimmed eyes. "Are you sure about that? Because I've spent 18 months turning to ice. Work, distance, control." "How is that different from Constance's methods?" "It's different because you're trying to change. You sat with your daughters last night. You held them while they cried. You're learning. Because of you." "No. Because you love them enough to be uncomfortable. That's all growth is, James. Being uncomfortable until the new way feels normal." They sat in silence as pale light filtered through the windows. The storm had passed, leaving the world buried in white. At 7 a.m., the twins woke. They came downstairs in their pajamas, rubbing sleep from their eyes. When they saw James, both stopped. "Daddy stayed," Charlotte whispered. "Of course I stayed." James opened his arms, hesitant, hopeful. "Come here, baby girls." Charlotte ran to him. Abigail followed more slowly, still testing, still uncertain. He wrapped them both in his arms and buried his face in their hair. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking. "I'm sorry for being gone so much. For not being here when you needed me. I'm here now. I promise I'm here now." "Where's Miss Constance?" Abigail asked. "She's in the hospital. She got sick last night, but the doctors are helping her." "Is she going to die like Mommy?" The question landed like a stone. James looked helplessly at Ellie. "We don't know yet, sweetheart," Ellie said gently. "The doctors are doing everything they can. But yes, sometimes people die even when we don't want them to. That's the scary part of loving people. We can't always keep them safe." "I don't want anyone else to die," Charlotte said, her voice small. "Neither do I, baby. Neither do I." 3 days later, Constance returned to the mansion. Not to work, the doctors had forbidden it for at least 6 weeks. But she'd refused to go to a rehabilitation facility, insisting she needed to speak with James. He met her in the library. Ellie waited outside, but the door wasn't fully closed. She could hear everything. "Mr. Westfield, I owe you an apology. Several apologies." Constance's voice was different, softer, stripped of its usual armor. "I've been cruel. To your daughters. To Miss Parker. To you." "Miss Whitmore, please, let me finish. I've spent 35 years punishing children for my own failure, and I didn't even realize I was doing it until I was lying on your floor thinking I was about to die." Silence. Then James. "What failure?" "Her name was Emily, my daughter. She died when she was 5 years old. I was working as a nanny for a wealthy family in Boston. Left Emily with a neighbor because I couldn't afford proper childcare. She drowned in our bathtub while I was teaching someone else's children to swim." Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. "The family fired me. Said they couldn't trust someone who'd let their own child die. They were right. I'd chosen their money over my daughter's safety, and she paid the price. Miss Whitmore, that was an accident. Was it? Or was it negligence? I've spent 3 decades trying to answer that question. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that if I could make other children strong enough, independent enough, unbreakable enough, maybe I could save Emily retroactively. Maybe I could prove that discipline and structure could prevent tragedy. But it doesn't work that way. No, it doesn't. Watching your daughters these past weeks, watching them bloom under Miss Parker's warmth, I finally understood. Emily didn't die because she was too soft. She died because I wasn't there. And I've been making children pay for my absence ever since." More silence. Then, "What you did to my daughters was unforgivable. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking if you'd let me try to make it right. Not as their nanny. I'm done with that. But perhaps I could start a foundation. Help parents dealing with postpartum depression. Help prevent what happened to your wife." "To my daughter. Why?" "Because I'm 68 years old, and I just learned that love isn't weakness. God, what a waste of a life. But maybe the years I have left can count for something." When Constance emerged, her eyes were red but clear. She saw Ellie in the hallway and stopped. "Miss Parker, I owe you the greatest apology. You don't. I do. You saved those children, not with credentials or methods or experience. You saved them with the one thing I forgot how to give. Thank you for showing an old woman she was wrong." "I'm sorry about Emily," Ellie said softly. "About your daughter." Constance's face crumpled. For a moment she looked ancient and lost. "I never even visit her grave. Can't bear to. 35 years, and I've never once said goodbye. It's not too late, isn't it? No, it's never too late to grieve, to forgive yourself, to say the things you need to say." Constance left that afternoon. But 2 weeks later, a letter arrived addressed to James and Ellie together. "Dear Mr. Westfield and Miss Parker, I visited Emily today. First time in 35 years, told her about Abigail and Charlotte, about how wrong I'd been, about how a young woman with no credentials taught me what 40 years of experience couldn't. I'm starting a foundation called Emily's Light. We'll provide free childcare for working mothers, counseling for postpartum depression, and support for families dealing with loss. Miss Parker, I hope you'll consult. Your approach, love first, rules second, should be taught, not buried. Tell the girls I'm sorry. Tell them their feelings matter. Tell them Miss Constance is learning, slowly, to be human again. With gratitude and regret, Constance Whitmore." That evening, James read the letter aloud to Ellie after the girls were asleep. They sat in the library where they'd first met, snow falling softly outside. "She's trying," he said. "After all these years, she's trying to change." "We're all trying," Ellie replied. "That's all any of us can do." He set the letter aside and looked at her, really looked at her. This young woman who'd walked into his broken house with nothing but a kind heart, and showed them all how to live again. "Ellie, there's something I need to tell you. About my mother's will." "Your mother's will?" "She died 2 years ago. Left most of her estate to me, but she included a strange provision. $2 million to be given to the woman who teaches my son how to love his children again." He pulled out a legal document. "My lawyer confirms it. You qualify." Ellie stared at the papers. $2 million, enough to pay off every debt her family had, to send Sam to college, to get her mother proper medical care, to never worry about money again. "I can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because I didn't do it for money. I did it because those girls deserve to be loved." "I know. That's exactly why you deserve it." He pushed the papers toward her. "Use it for Sam's education, your mother's health, whatever you need. My mother was a wise woman. She knew what she was doing." Ellie's hands shook as she touched the papers. "James, this is too much. It's not enough. Nothing could ever be enough for what you've given us." Before she could respond, small footsteps sounded in the hallway. Charlotte appeared in her pajamas, clutching her blue blanket, eyes wide and frightened. "Bad dream," she whispered. Ellie opened her arms, and Charlotte ran to her. James watched them. This woman who'd saved his daughters, now holding them through nightmares he'd once thought he couldn't face. And he realized something that had been building for weeks. He was falling in love with her. 6 months passed like snowmelt into spring. The transformation happened in increments too small to measure daily, but impossible to miss across weeks. Charlotte spoke in full sentences now, her voice gaining confidence with each passing day. Abigail had started preschool and came home with paintings taped to the refrigerator, stories about friends, scraped knees from playground adventures. James worked from home 3 days a week, sometimes 4. He'd learned to braid hair, badly, but with love. He read bedtime stories with different voices for each character. He sat through tea parties with stuffed animals and remembered that being a father meant being present, not perfect. Ellie had used part of the inheritance to move her mother and Sam to a small house in Bar Harbor. Ruth worked part-time at a bakery now, her heart condition managed with proper medication. Sam was enrolled at the University of Maine, his anxiety disorder improving with regular therapy. He visited the mansion often, the twins adoring their Uncle Sam. The rest of the money sat untouched in an account Ellie couldn't quite believe existed. $2 million. A future she'd never imagined, security for the first time in her 26 years. But it wasn't the money that made her wake up smiling. It was the sound of laughter drifting through the mansion. Charlotte's giggles when James tickled her. Abigail's delighted shrieks during games of chase. The house that had been a beautiful tomb now breathed with life. And it was James himself. She'd fallen in love with him slowly, fighting it every step. He was her employer, the father of children she cared for, a man still grieving his wife, every reason to keep distance. But distance became impossible when he looked at her across the breakfast table with something warm and wondering in his eyes. Memorial Day weekend arrived with unseasonable warmth. James had planned a picnic on the private beach below the mansion, something Catherine would have loved, he said, something they should start doing again. They spread blankets on the sand while the twins chased waves, shrieking when cold water touched their toes. Ruth had packed a basket of food. Sam threw a frisbee that neither twin could catch, but both chased with determination. "This is nice," Ellie said, watching Charlotte bury Abigail's feet in sand. "This is really nice." James sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "It is. And it's because of you. It's because you learned to be here, to show up. Same thing." He was quiet for a moment, watching his daughters. "Ellie, I need to ask you something. And if the answer is no, nothing changes. Your job is safe. Our friendship is safe. But I have to ask, or I'll regret it forever." Her heart began to pound. "Okay." He turned to face her fully. "6 months ago, I asked if you'd stay. Not as an employee, but as family. You said yes, and you've been exactly that, family. The twins call you Mama Ellie now. They light up when you walk in a room. You brought us back to life. James, let me finish. Please." He took her hand. "I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other in the conventional sense. I know you might not feel the same way. But Ellie, somewhere between the first night you sat with crying children and this morning when you braided Charlotte's hair, I fell in love with you. Not because you saved my daughters, not because you brought joy back to this house, but because you're brave and kind and real, and I can't imagine my life without you in it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "This isn't an engagement ring, not yet. This is a promise ring, a promise that I want forever with you, if you'll have me. A promise that we'll take this slow, do it right, build something real." "Ellie Parker, will you let me love you? Will you let us be a family, not just by circumstance, but by choice?" Tears streamed down Ellie's face. She looked at the ring. Simple, elegant, perfect. Then at James, this man who'd learned to be vulnerable. Then at the twins playing in the surf, these children who'd taught her that saving others could save yourself. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, to all of it." He slipped the ring on her finger. They kissed as the waves rolled in, as the twins cheered, as Ruth wiped her eyes and Sam grinned. 3 months later, they married in the mansion's garden under late summer sun. The ceremony was small, close friends and family only. The twins were flower girls in lavender dresses they'd picked themselves. Ruth walked Ellie down the aisle, whispering, "Your daddy would be so proud." During the vows, Ellie promised to love James through grief and joy, through certainty and doubt. James promised to show up, to stay present, to choose her every day. But the most important vows came when they both turned to the twins. "Abigail, Charlotte," Ellie said, kneeling to their level, "I promise to love you, protect you, and let you be exactly who you are. I'll never try to replace your mother. She'll always be part of you, but I promise to be here every day for as long as you need me." "We love you, Mama Ellie," Charlotte said clearly. "Love you," Abigail echoed, throwing her arms around Ellie's neck. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. As twilight fell and fireflies began to dance, Ellie and James swayed on the makeshift dance floor. The twins danced nearby with Sam. Ruth sat watching, hand over her heart. "Thank you," James whispered against Ellie's hair, "for not giving up on us. Thank you for letting me in." The mansion glowed with light and laughter. Once it had been beautiful but dead. Now it was beautiful and alive, filled with the sound of children playing, of love spoken aloud, of a family choosing each other every single day. Perfect? No. But real. And that was more than enough. Sometimes we think we've missed our chance at happiness. We tell ourselves it's too late to start over, too late to heal old wounds, too late to build the family we always wanted. But here's the truth this story whispers to us. It's never too late for love to walk through your door. James thought Joy died with his wife. Constance spent 35 years punishing herself for a tragedy she couldn't prevent. Ellie carried 12 years of guilt for her sister's death. Each of them believed their brokenness was permanent. But what they discovered changed everything. Broken people can still build whole families, not perfect ones, real ones. The kind where you show up messy and hurting and scared and someone stays anyway. The kind where children teach adults how to laugh again. Where second chances feel like first loves. Where forgiveness, of yourself, of others, becomes the bridge to everything you thought you'd lost forever. This isn't just a story about a nanny and a billionaire. It's about all of us who carry grief we can't name, who wonder if happiness will ever find us again. It will. Sometimes it arrives in the least expected way, wearing the face of someone who simply refuses to give up on us. What moment in your life taught you it's never too late to start again? Have you ever found healing in an unexpected place? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.